The morning started like any other in the peaceful Kethmori system. Crystal beings floated through their translucent cities, tending to gardens that grew in perfect harmony. Children played games that never involved conflict, and their greatest worry was whether the star flowers would bloom on schedule. Then the sky turned black. Ambassador Zara pressed her crystalline face against the observation deck window, watching something impossible unfold before her eyes. Massive organic ships, each one the size of a small moon, were literally eating her homeworld's sister planet. She could see chunks of rock and metal disappearing into writhing biological mouths that stretched across the alien vessels. "How long do we have?" she asked the defense coordinator, though her voice trembled with the answer she already knew. Based on their current consumption rate, maybe 6 hours before they finish with Kethmori Prime. Then they'll move to our world. 6 hours? An entire civilization that had existed for thousands of years would be gone in 6 hours. The Void Swarm had appeared without warning 3 months ago. They didn't communicate, didn't negotiate, didn't even seem to acknowledge that intelligent life existed. They simply consumed everything in their path like a cosmic infection spreading through space. The Confederacy had tried everything. Their most advanced energy weapons bounced harmlessly off the creatures' adaptive shells. Biological attacks were absorbed and somehow made the swarm stronger. They'd even attempted to reason with them, broadcasting mathematical formulas and artistic expressions that had worked with every other species they'd ever encountered. The swarm's response was always the same. They kept eating. "Send the emergency broadcast on all frequencies," Zara commanded. "Every system, every species, every civilization we've ever made contact with. Ambassador, we've already tried that. The hegemony won't help because they see this as an opportunity to expand their own territory. The trade union is too far away to mount any meaningful response. And the peaceful alliance." The coordinator paused. "What about them? They've gone completely silent." "We think their core worlds have already been consumed." Zara felt her crystalline heart crack just a little more. The Peaceful Alliance had been their closest friends in the galaxy, a group of species who believed violence was never the answer to any problem. If they were truly gone, then perhaps violence really was the only language the universe understood. But the Confederacy didn't know how to speak that language. They had evolved on worlds where cooperation meant survival, where working together was more important than fighting. Their weapons were designed for mining asteroids and defending against natural disasters, not warfare against something this aggressive. "Expand the broadcast range," she ordered, surprising everyone in the room. "Mum, that would include the quarantine zones, the restricted sectors that the Galactic Council marked as too dangerous for contact." Zara looked back at the window, where another chunk of the planet disappeared into a writhing alien mouth. At this point, dangerous might be exactly what we need. The message went out across space, traveling faster than light through quantum communication networks. It reached peaceful trading posts where merchants discussed profit margins over afternoon tea. It arrived at scientific research stations where brilliant minds worked on problems that would benefit everyone. It even found its way to military outposts belonging to species who thought they were tough but had never faced anything like the swarm. None of them responded with anything useful. Sympathy, yes. Offers of refugee assistance, certainly. But no one had weapons capable of stopping something that adapted to every attack within minutes. The message also reached the edge of known space, where ancient monitoring stations had been placed centuries ago. These stations had one job: watch the restricted zones and make sure nothing dangerous came out of them. One of these stations was positioned near a small, blue-green planet that most of the galaxy tried very hard to forget existed. The planet's inhabitants called it Earth, though the official galactic designation was much longer and included several warnings about biological hazards, psychological instability, and extreme violence. The station's automated systems had been recording everything that happened on Earth for over 300 years. They had watched these creatures fight wars over resources, territory, ideas, and sometimes for reasons that seemed completely irrational. They had seen them develop weapons capable of destroying their own planet multiple times over. Then somehow, managed not to use them. Most disturbing of all, they had watched humans get stronger after every conflict, learning from their mistakes and developing new ways to survive threats. That should have destroyed them completely. The Galactic Council had classified Earth as a death world, not just because of its harsh environment, but because of what that environment had created. Humans were the product of millions of years of constant threat, adaptation, and survival. They were what happened when evolution was pushed to its absolute limits. When Zara's desperate message reached the monitoring station, something unprecedented happened. For the first time in 3 centuries, the station received a response from the surface of Earth. It wasn't from any government or official organization. It came from a small group of humans who had been secretly monitoring galactic communications, waiting for this exact moment. They had known about the wider universe for decades, respecting the quarantine while quietly preparing for the day when isolation might no longer be possible. The response was simple and direct. "We hear you. We're coming." Down on Earth, in a hidden facility buried deep beneath the Canadian Rockies, a woman named Captain Rodriguez was gathering her team. They had spent years studying alien technology, learning everything they could about galactic civilization from intercepted communications. They knew about the peaceful species, the trade networks, and the careful balance that kept everyone safe. They also knew that sometimes, when peaceful solutions failed, someone had to be willing to do what others couldn't. The brass is still debating whether we should get involved, Rodriguez told her assembled group of soldiers, scientists, and engineers. They're worried about how the galaxy will react to finding out. We've been listening to their conversations for decades. Dr. Park, the team's lead scientist, pulled up a holographic display showing the swarm's progression through Confederacy space. At their current rate of expansion, they'll reach the outer edges of our solar system within 2 years. This isn't really a choice anymore. What about the quarantine protocols? Asked Lieutenant Jackson, the team's communications expert. The quarantine was meant to protect them from us, Rodriguez replied. But right now, it looks like they need protection from something else entirely. The room fell quiet as everyone absorbed what they were really discussing. Humanity was about to make first contact with alien civilization, not as explorers or diplomats, but as the cavalry arriving at the last possible moment. Are we really going to do this? Someone asked. Rodriguez looked around the room at faces she had worked with for years. People who had dedicated their lives to protecting Earth from threats that most humans didn't even know existed. They were soldiers, but they were also human beings who couldn't stand by and watch entire civilizations disappear when they might be able to help. We spent our whole history fighting each other because we didn't have anyone else to fight, she said quietly. Maybe it's time we fought for someone else for a change. The decision was made. Within hours, ships were being prepared, weapons were being loaded, and humanity was getting ready to step out of the shadows and into a galaxy that had never seen anything quite like them. Back in the Kefmori system, Ambassador Zara watched another piece of her world disappear into alien jaws. She didn't know help was coming. She didn't know that somewhere in the darkness between stars, the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced was preparing to prove that sometimes the only way to save peace was through war. All she knew was that her people were running out of time, and their salvation might come from the most unexpected place of all. The meeting place looked like something out of a science fiction movie, except this time it was real. A hastily built space station floated in the neutral zone between human and alien territory, its metal corridors still smelling of fresh welding and recycled air. Captain Rodriguez stepped off the human transport ship, her boots making unfamiliar sounds on alien design floors. Remember, they've never seen a human before, Dr. Park whispered as they walked toward the central meeting chamber. Try not to do anything that might scare them, Rodriguez almost laughed. We're the ones responding to their emergency call. If anything, they should be trying not to scare us. But as the doors slid open and she got her first look at the alien delegation, Rodriguez understood why everyone was nervous. The beings waiting for them looked nothing like the movies had imagined. Ambassador Zara appeared to be made of living crystal, her body catching and reflecting light in ways that seemed almost magical. Next to her stood a creature that looked like a walking tree, its bark-like skin moving slowly as it breathed. The third alien resembled a large, intelligent jellyfish floating in a mobility suit filled with some kind of liquid. For a moment, nobody spoke. 300 years of quarantine had just ended, and no one quite knew what to say. "You came," Zara finally whispered, her voice creating musical tones that the translation device converted into English. "We didn't think anyone would answer. We've been listening for a long time," Rodriguez replied, keeping her voice steady. "We heard you needed help." The tree-like being, who introduced himself as Elder Corvin, leaned forward with obvious curiosity. "Forgive me, but we must ask. Your species was classified as extremely dangerous. Why would you risk exposing yourselves to help strangers?" Dr. Park stepped forward, data pad in hand. "Because that's what neighbors do. And like it or not, we're all neighbors in this galaxy." The next few hours were unlike anything anyone had imagined first contact would be like. Instead of grand speeches about peace and cooperation, they found themselves huddled around a tactical display, discussing the most efficient ways to stop an alien species from eating entire worlds. "Show us what you've tried," Rodriguez requested. And the aliens began displaying their previous attempts to stop the swarm. The humans watched in fascination as holographic battles played out before them. The aliens had used massive energy weapons that could crack moons, biological weapons designed to disrupt alien metabolism, and even tried ramming ships at near light speed into the swarm vessels. "Impressive firepower," admitted Lieutenant Chen, the team's weapons specialist, "but you're fighting them like they're machines. What if they're not?" "What do you mean?" asked the jellyfish-like being, whose name translated roughly to current that flows upward. "You keep trying to overpower them," Chen explained, highlighting sections of the tactical data. "But look at their response patterns. They adapt to every weapon within hours, sometimes minutes. That's not mechanical programming. That's biological learning." Dr. Park nodded, pulling up her own analysis. "On Earth, when we encounter an adaptive immune system, we don't try to overpower it. We confuse it." The aliens exchanged glances that somehow conveyed confusion, despite their completely different facial structures. "Explain this concept of confusion," Elder Corvin requested. Rodriguez leaned back in her chair, trying to figure out how to explain human military thinking to beings who had never needed to develop it, okay? Imagine you're playing a game where the rules keep changing. Eventually, you learn to adapt to new rules quickly, right? The aliens nodded. "Now imagine someone starts playing by completely random rules. No pattern, no logic, just chaos. How do you adapt to that?" The silence that followed was profound. Zara's crystalline features seemed to shimmer as she processed this idea. "You're suggesting we fight unpredictably. We're suggesting we fight like humans," Rodriguez corrected. "Because the one thing we've always been good at is surviving things that should have destroyed us completely." The conversation took an unexpected turn when Current That Flows Upward asked about human physiology. Dr. Park began explaining the basics, but the aliens' reactions grew increasingly shocked. "You have only one heart?" Zara asked in amazement. "And only to kidneys?" added Elder Corvin. "Your bones are solid calcium phosphate with no redundant supports?" Dr. Park looked confused. "How many hearts do you have?" "3 primary, to backup." Zara replied matter-of-factly, "plus distributed circulatory nodes throughout our crystalline matrix. The idea of relying on a single pump to keep you alive is terrifying. Our species typically has between 4 and 7 kidneys, depending on environmental factors," Current That Flows Upward explained. "Kidney failure is virtually impossible for us," Elder Corvin gestured to his bark-like skin. "Our skeletal system is a living network that can regrow entire limbs if necessary. We've never heard of bones that can't heal themselves completely." Lieutenant Chen grinned. "Wait until you hear about our brain design, single central processing unit. No backup copies." The aliens stared in what could only be described as horror. "How do you survive anything?" Zara asked. Very carefully, Rodriguez replied. And when careful doesn't work, we get creative. The real breakthrough came when Dr. Park showed them human military history. Not the wars themselves, but the innovations that came from them. Medical advances born from battlefield necessity. Technology developed under pressure. Solutions created when conventional thinking failed completely. You learn from conflict, Elder Corvin observed with something like wonder in his voice. We learn from everything, Chen corrected. But yeah, we've gotten really good at learning from the bad stuff. The aliens shared more intelligence about the swarm. They showed feeding patterns, reproduction cycles, and communication methods. But the more data they provided, the more the humans began to suspect something the aliens had missed. These aren't random attacks, Rodriguez realized. Studying the progression maps, look at the pattern. They're not just consuming resources. They're specifically targeting the most advanced civilizations first. That's impossible. Zara protested. They don't communicate. They don't show any signs of intelligence beyond basic adaptation. Maybe they don't need to communicate, Dr. Park suggested quietly. What if they're not individual creatures at all? What if the entire swarm is one organism? The idea hung in the air like a challenge. If the swarm was a single entity, then every battle the aliens had fought wasn't against an army, but against a single, incredibly complex creature that was learning from every encounter. A hive mind, Chen breathed. That's why they adapt so quickly. Every ship, every creature, every weapon they encounter teaches the entire swarm something new. Which means, Rodriguez concluded, we need to teach them something that will hurt instead of help. The meeting concluded with an agreement that would have been unthinkable just days before. Humanity would come out of quarantine to help fight the swarm, and the aliens would provide technological support and tactical intelligence. But as the delegations prepared to return to their ships, Zara approached Rodriguez privately. Captain, I must ask you something that troubles me. Your species has been classified as dangerous for centuries. How do we know that helping you will not simply replace one threat with another? Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the stars through the station's observation window. You don't, she finally admitted. The same things that make us good at fighting the swarm could make us a problem later. We know that. Then why should we trust you? Because. Rodriguez turned to face the crystalline ambassador. We're the ones who've been staying in quarantine voluntarily for 300 years. We could have broken out any time we wanted. We didn't because we respected your wishes. Even though we didn't agree with them, she paused, gathering her thoughts. We're not asking you to trust us forever. We're asking you to trust us right now. When you need us most, after this is over, if you want us to go back into quarantine, we'll discuss it. But right now, you need someone who knows how to fight impossible odds and win. Zara nodded slowly, her crystalline features reflecting the starlight. I hope we are making the right choice. So do we, Rodriguez replied honestly. But doing nothing was definitely the wrong choice as the human ship pulled away from the station. Heading back to Earth to gather reinforcements, Rodriguez couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to change the galaxy forever. Whether that change would be for better or worse remained to be seen. The universe was about to discover what humans could do when they stopped fighting each other and started fighting for someone else. The human fleet arrived at the Kethmori homeworld just as the sky was turning black. With swarm ships, from her position on the bridge of the flagship, Admiral Rivers watched through the view screen as massive organic vessels descended toward the planet's surface like hungry predators. How many ships did they bring? Asked the alien liaison officer, his translator struggling with the mixture of awe and terror in his voice. Not nearly enough, Rivers replied calmly, studying the tactical display. But then again, we never do. The swarm had learned from their previous encounters with alien forces. Their bioships now displayed adaptive armor that shifted and changed in real time, preparing for the energy weapons and explosive devices they had faced before. What they weren't prepared for was something completely different. All ships, this is Admiral Rivers. Remember, we're not here to fight fair. We're here to win. Begin Operation Chaos Theory. The first wave of human ships did something that made the alien observers question whether humans understood space combat at all. Instead of forming organized battle lines or executing coordinated attacks, they scattered in seemingly random directions, each ship following completely different flight patterns. "What are they doing?" Zara asked from the alien command ship, watching human vessels perform maneuvers that violated every principle of tactical warfare. She had ever learned. Dr. Park, who was monitoring the battle from the science station, smiled grimly, something the swarm has never seen before: pure, calculated chaos. The swarm's response was immediate and telling. Their bioships began adapting to each human attack pattern, but every time they adjusted their defenses, the humans changed tactics completely. One ship would attack with kinetic weapons, while another used electromagnetic pulses, and a third would ram directly into enemy vessels before teleporting the crew to safety. At the last second, they're not following any battle plan, current that flows upward. Observe with fascination. That's exactly the point, Dr. Park explained. The swarm learns by recognizing patterns. But humans have spent their entire evolutionary history surviving by being unpredictable. Colonel Hayes led the most audacious part of the operation. Her team had modified a captured swarm bioship, not to destroy it, but to make it think it was still part of the collective while actually being under human control. It was like performing surgery on a living creature while it was still awake and unaware that anything was wrong. Infiltration team, report status. Rivers commanded from the flagship. "We're inside their command structure," Hayes responded, her voice crackling through the bioship's organic communication system. "And Admiral, you need to see this. They're not just eating planets for resources. They're trying to understand what intelligence actually is." The revelation changed everything. Deep inside the swarm's central control organism, Hayes and her team discovered something that looked like a massive biological computer. But instead of processing data, it was processing thoughts, emotions, and memories taken from every civilization the swarm had consumed. "It's like they're trying to figure out what makes us different from them," reported Dr. Martinez, the team's xenobiologist. "Every species they've absorbed has added to this collection of consciousness patterns." Which means, Hayes realized with growing excitement, they might be more confused than we thought. The battle above the planet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human ships used tactics that seemed to border on madness. They deliberately damaged their own vessels to confuse enemy targeting systems. They broadcast contradictory signals to scramble swarm communication networks. Some ships even played human music at maximum volume, filling space with everything from classical symphonies to heavy metal. "Are they enjoying this?" Elder Corvin asked in bewilderment as he watched human pilots laugh and cheer while performing maneuvers that should have been terrifying. "Humans have a strange relationship with danger," Dr. Park admitted. "For us, surviving something that should have destroyed us isn't just victory, it's fun." The turning point came when Dr. Chen deployed his secret weapon. Instead of trying to poison or destroy the swarm, he had created something far more insidious, a biological agent that would give individual swarm creatures the ability to feel emotions. "You're going to make them feel things?" Zara asked in amazement. "Fear, doubt, loneliness, curiosity," Chen confirmed as he prepared the delivery system for a hive mind. "Individual emotions are like a computer virus. They'll spread through the collective and cause chaos from within." The weapon was deployed through the infiltration team, who introduced it directly into the swarm's central nervous system. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the battlefield, swarm ships began behaving erratically. Some stopped attacking entirely, as if confused about their purpose. Others started communicating with each other in ways that seemed almost conversational. "It's working," Hayes reported from inside the bioship. "They're starting to think of themselves as individuals instead of parts of a whole. Some of them are even asking questions about what they're doing here." But the most shocking moment came when several swarm creatures actively turned against their own kind, protecting the planets they had been sent to consume. The hive mind was fracturing, and individual consciousness was emerging from the chaos. The battle lasted 18 hours, but by the end, something unprecedented had happened. The swarm didn't retreat in an organized fashion. Instead, different groups went in different directions, some heading back toward their origin point, others staying behind to help repair the damage they had caused. Admiral Rivers found herself in the strange position of accepting surrender from creatures that had never surrendered before, simply because they had never been individuals capable of making that choice. Status report. She requested as the immediate fighting died down. Kethmori homeworld is secure. Came the response from the surface. Swarm forces have either withdrawn or requested asylum. We've got about 300 former swarm creatures asking for refugee status. Refugee status, Rivers repeated in amazement. Apparently, once they started thinking for themselves, a lot of them decided they didn't want to eat planets anymore. Some of them are asking if they can learn to grow food instead. The aftermath was chaos of a different kind. Medical teams rushed to help both human and alien wounded, while scientists tried to figure out what to do with suddenly sentient creatures that had been weapons of mass destruction just hours before. Zara approached Admiral Rivers as the command ships prepared to dock. Your tactics were completely insane, she said without preamble. Thank you. Rivers replied with a tired smile. That wasn't a compliment. From our perspective, it was. The crystalline ambassador paused, considering her words carefully. How? Did you know it would work? How did you know that chaos would be more effective than organized strategy? Rivers looked out at the stars. We're human and alien ships were working together to rescue survivors and contain the remaining swarm forces. Because chaos is what made us human in the first place, every day on Earth was unpredictable, dangerous, and required us to adapt or die. We learned that sometimes the only way to solve an impossible problem is to stop thinking about it logically and start thinking about it creatively. And the emotional weapon? How did you know that would work on a hive mind? Dr. Chen joined the conversation, looking exhausted but pleased with the results. Because we've seen what happens when people lose their individuality, it never ends well. We figured that maybe the reverse was also true. Give a collective individual thoughts, and it stops being a collective. The success was overwhelming, but it came with a cost that was typically human. 60% of the human fleet had sustained damage, and hundreds of personnel had been injured in tactics that prioritized mission success over personal safety. Your people accept tremendous risks, Elder Corvin observed as he watched human medics work on both human and alien patients without distinction. That's because we know the real risk isn't getting hurt, Rivers replied. The real risk is not trying at all. As the immediate crisis subsided, reports began coming in from across the galaxy. The swarm's coordinated attacks had stopped everywhere, replaced by confusion and, in many cases, genuine attempts at communication from individual swarm creatures who were experiencing consciousness for the first time. But perhaps the most important development was the message that came through from the infiltration team still inside the swarm bioship. Admiral, you need to hear this, Hayes reported. We've been talking to the newly conscious swarm individuals, and they've told us something important. The eating, the expanding, the constant consumption. They weren't doing it because they wanted to. They were doing it because they were running away from something else. The celebration stopped abruptly. Running away from what? Rivers asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. Something they're more afraid of than anything else in the universe. Something that created them in the first place. And something that's been hunting them across the galaxy for thousands of years. The victory suddenly felt much smaller, and the universe much more dangerous. Humanity had solved one problem only, to discover that it was just the beginning of something much larger and more threatening than anyone had imagined. The celebration didn't last long. Within hours of the victory at Kethmori, the political shockwaves began rippling across the galaxy. Admiral Rivers stood in the medical bay of her flagship, watching human medics work alongside alien doctors to save lives. When the first angry transmission arrived, "This is Director Kane of the Hegemony Council." The voice crackled through the communication system. "You have violated 3 centuries of quarantine protocols and unleashed the most dangerous species in the galaxy. We demand immediate withdrawal of all human forces. Rivers didn't bother to look up from the wounded soldier she was visiting. Tell Director Kane that we're a little busy saving lives right now. He can file a complaint with someone who cares. But the complaints kept coming. The Villanathi Empire, despite owing their survival to human intervention, sent formal protests about unauthorized military action in galactic space. Trade unions worried about economic disruption. Even some of the species that had been saved were now questioning whether they had simply replaced one threat with another. Captain Rodriguez found herself sitting in endless diplomatic meetings she never wanted to attend, listening to alien politicians debate humanity's fate, while human soldiers were still recovering from injuries sustained saving those same politicians. Worlds. The human military response was excessive and unpredictable, argued Ambassador Tvrak of the Villanathi. Their tactics violated every established convention of civilized warfare. Civilized warfare? Rodriguez finally spoke up, her voice cutting through the diplomatic chatter. Is that what you call letting entire civilizations get eaten while you debate proper protocols? The meeting room fell silent. Most of these delegates had never heard a human speak before, and Rodriguez's tone carried an edge that made them uncomfortable. You're upset because our methods weren't neat and orderly. She continued, standing up from her chair. You want warfare that follows rules and doesn't make anyone uncomfortable. Well, here's the thing about rules. The swarm didn't know about them, and they didn't care. Elder Corvin, who had become something of an ally to the humans, spoke carefully. Captain Rodriguez, I think what my colleagues are trying to express is concern about future interactions. Your species has proven remarkably effective at warfare, perhaps too effective. So what you're saying is, you wanted us to save you, but not to well. The awkward silence that followed was broken by an unexpected voice. One of the former swarm creatures, now calling herself Nova, had been given permission to address the assembly. Her appearance was still unsettling too many of the delegates, but her newly developed consciousness had made her an invaluable source of information. If I may speak, Nova said, her voice carrying harmonics that the translation system struggled to process. Before I became individual, I was part of the collective that consumed 17 civilizations. I have memories of billions of lives ended by my actions. She paused, her bioluminescent patches flickering with what the humans had learned to recognize as emotion. The humans did not just defeat us, they gave us the choice to become something else. Every other species we encountered tried to destroy. Only the humans tried to save us, even while we were attacking them. The political debate might have continued indefinitely, but it was interrupted by a priority alert from the deep space monitoring stations. Dr. Chen rushed into the meeting chamber, his face pale with urgent concern. We have a problem, he announced without preamble. A big one. The holographic display activated, showing a massive structure emerging from the dark nebula at the galaxy's edge. It was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, and it was clearly artificial. More disturbing was the fact that it was heading directly toward the systems, where the reformed swarm creatures had taken refuge. What is that thing? Zara asked, her crystalline features reflecting the light from the display. Nova's response chilled everyone in the room. That is what we were running from. The architects. They created us as a cleaning tool, designed to eliminate species that became too complex or too aggressive. The revelation hit the assembly like a physical blow. The swarm hadn't been invaders. They had been tools, created by something far older and more dangerous. Created by whom? Rodriguez demanded. A civilization that transcended physical existence. Millions of years ago, Nova explained, her bioluminescent patterns now pulsing with what could only be described as fear. They left behind automated systems to maintain what they called universal balance. Whenever a species develops technology or behavior that might threaten cosmic stability, the architect's machines activate us to clean up the problem. Dr. Chen was running calculations on his handheld device. If this thing is as old as you're suggesting, it would have processing power beyond anything we've ever imagined. It could have databases of every species that ever existed in this galaxy, including detailed information about humans, Nova confirmed. The moment you broke quarantine and demonstrated your military capabilities, you became a priority target. The political arguments suddenly seemed petty and irrelevant. Ambassador Trak, who had been demanding human withdrawal just minutes earlier, now looked terrified. What does this architect machine want? To reset the galaxy? Nova replied simply. To eliminate every species that has grown beyond what the original architects considered safe levels of development. Admiral Rivers joined the emergency session, having left her medical bay duties to deal with this new crisis. How long do we have? Based on its current trajectory and speed, approximately 6 days before it reaches the reformed swarm settlements, 2 weeks before it arrives at the major population centers. The room erupted in panic conversation, but Rodriguez was focused on Nova. You said it was designed to eliminate complex or aggressive species. What exactly triggers its attention? Advanced technology, large-scale warfare, rapid cultural development, and Nova hesitated. And what? Species that successfully resist the swarm. We were supposed to be unstoppable. The fact that you not only defeated us, but converted us into individuals, means you represent exactly the kind of unpredictable development the architects were designed to prevent. The irony was devastating. By saving the galaxy from the swarm, humanity had attracted the attention of something far more dangerous. Dr. Chen was studying the readings from the approaching structure. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. This thing makes the swarm look like a minor inconvenience. What are its capabilities? Elder Corvin asked. Nova's response was sobering. It can manipulate matter at the molecular level, control gravity fields large enough to move stars, and contains manufacturing systems that can create entire fleets of war machines within hours. It has been perfecting these abilities for millions of years. Great, Rodriguez muttered. We've gone from fighting a hive mind to facing cosmic gardeners who think we're weeds. But as the implications sank in, something interesting happened. The political divisions that had seemed so important moments earlier began to dissolve. The Velnathi stopped demanding human withdrawal. The hegemony stopped complaining about protocol violations. Even the trade unions stopped worrying about economic disruption. When faced with extinction, everyone became allies very quickly. What do we do? Zara asked, looking around the room at faces from dozens of different species. We do what humans always do when something impossible tries to destroy us. Rodriguez replied with a grim smile. We figure out how to make it regret. The attempt. Admiral Rivers was already coordinating with her tactical staff. Nova, we need everything you know about architect technology, weaknesses, blind spots. Anything we can use? There may be one advantage, Nova said slowly. The architects designed their systems to deal with predictable threats, species that follow logical patterns of development and behavior. And humans? Humans are the least predictable species I have ever encountered. Your response to the swarm proved that you did things that violated every rational expectation. Dr. Chen looked up from his calculations. So you're saying our complete lack of logical thinking might actually be useful? It might be the only thing that saves us all, Nova replied. The meeting ended with an unprecedented agreement. Every major civilization in the galaxy would contribute resources, technology, and personnel to a joint task force. But everyone understood that the strategic leadership would have to come from the species that had already proven they could win impossible battles. As the delegates dispersed to contact their home governments, Rodriguez found herself standing alone with Admiral Rivers. And Nova, any ideas on how we fight something that's been perfecting cosmic warfare for millions of years? Rivers asked. Rodriguez looked out at the stars. We're human, and alien ships were already beginning to work together on defensive preparations. The same way we've always fought things that were bigger and stronger than us. We don't fight it on its terms. We make it fight on ours. And what are our terms? Chaos, creativity, and the absolute refusal to do what anyone expects us to do. The next 6 days would determine whether human unpredictability was enough to save not just their own species, but every intelligent life form in the galaxy. The architects were coming, and they were about to discover what happened when an unstoppable force met an absolutely unpredictable object. The dark nebula looked like a wound in space itself, its swirling clouds blocking out the stars and creating an area of absolute darkness that even the most advanced sensors struggled to penetrate. The Joint Task Force approached cautiously, with human ships leading the formation and alien vessels providing technological support. General Hayes stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the nebula grow larger on the view screen. Beside her, Nova's bioluminescent patches flickered with patterns that had become familiar to the human crew. Over the past few days, how are you holding up? Hayes asked the former swarm creature. I am experiencing what you humans call anxiety, Nova replied, her harmonics creating an almost musical quality in her translated voice. It is most unpleasant, but also strangely motivating. Welcome to being human, Hayes said with a wry smile. Fear keeps us alive, but we don't let it keep us from doing what needs to be done. The first sign of the architect's structure was not visual, but gravitational. Space itself began to bend and twist as they approached, creating navigation hazards that forced the fleet to constantly adjust course. When they finally got their first clear view of their target, the silence on the bridge was profound. The structure was massive beyond comprehension, a geometric impossibility that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human minds could easily process. It pulsed with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly, and sensor readings suggested it was actively manufacturing something deep within its core. Analysis complete, reported Dr. Chen from the science station. It's creating an entire fleet of war machines, each one designed to counter the specific military capabilities of every species in our task force. How long until they're ready? Hayes asked, based on the energy signatures, approximately 4 hours. Nova's patterns shifted to what the humans had learned indicated deep concern. The architect's machines always give their targets time to surrender. They consider it more efficient than warfare, as if responding to her words. A communication signal reached the fleet, but this wasn't like anything they had ever received before. Instead of words or images, it transmitted concepts directly into their minds, bypassing language entirely. The message was simple and absolute: submit to evaluation and potential elimination, or be destroyed as a threat to universal stability. Well, that's not ominous at all, muttered Lieutenant Brooks from the communications station. But Hayes was studying the tactical displays with growing excitement. Wait a minute. Look at this manufacturing pattern. It's creating specific counter-weapons for every ship design in our fleet. That's bad, right? Asked Captain Rodriguez, who had joined the command crew for the final battle. It's predictable, Hayes corrected with a grin that made several alien officers nervous. It's assuming we're going to fight it with the ships we brought. The plan that emerged over the next hour was so typically human that it made most of the alien allies question whether their new partners were actually insane. Instead of engaging the architect structure with their military vessels, they were going to send in a small team using civilian transport ships, modified with the most chaotic mix of technologies they could assemble. You want to attack a cosmic superweapon with cargo haulers and passenger shuttles, Ambassador Tvrak said flatly, his tone suggesting he thought the humans had finally lost their minds completely. Not attack, Rodriguez corrected, confused. This thing has been preparing for millions of years to fight logical, predictable enemies. We're going to give it something it has no reference point for. The infiltration team was even more unconventional. Instead of elite soldiers, it consisted of Dr. Chen, Nova, a reformed swarm creature called Echo who had developed an interest in human poetry, and a maintenance engineer named Davis who had volunteered because he was curious about architect technology. This is your assault team, Elder Corvin asked in amazement, a scientist, to former enemies, and someone whose job is fixing air recyclers, plus me, Hayes added cheerfully. Someone has to keep them out of trouble. The approach to the architect's structure was deliberately chaotic. The civilian ships flew erratic patterns, broadcast human music mixed with swarm harmonics and alien mathematical formulas, and painted their hulls with colors that created optical illusions. When viewed by sensor rays, the effect on the architect defenses was immediate and visible. Weapon systems designed to track and destroy military targets kept losing log on ships that didn't behave like military targets. Point defense systems programmed to engage incoming missiles fired uselessly at debris that turned out to be children's toys launched from cargo bays. "It's working," Chen reported as they penetrated the outer defensive perimeter. "Their targeting systems are designed for threats that follow logical attack patterns. They literally can't understand what we're doing." Inside the structure, the team found themselves in corridors that seemed to extend infinitely in all directions, with architecture that defied three-dimensional thinking. But Nova and Echo, with their biological ability to perceive in different ways, were able to navigate toward the central control core. "This place is older than our entire civilization," Davis observed, running his hands along walls that seemed to be made of crystallized time itself. "How do you even begin to understand technology like this?" "You don't," Chen replied. "Scanning the energy patterns around them, you just figure out which part to break." The central chamber was a sphere of pure light suspended in what looked like the space between dimensions. At its center, a consciousness that had been waiting for millions of years finally acknowledged their presence. The architect AI spoke without words, its thoughts appearing directly in their minds. It explained that it was the last guardian of a cosmic order, designed to prevent the universe from destroying itself through chaos and violence. Every species that grew too complex, too aggressive, or too unpredictable was eliminated before it could spread disorder to other worlds. "You represent the ultimate threat," it told them, "being so chaotic that they turn enemies into allies, so unpredictable that they win battles by refusing to fight them properly, so dangerous that they create weapons from compassion itself." "We prefer to think of it as creative problem-solving," Hayes replied, somehow managing to sound conversational while addressing a cosmic intelligence. But Dr. Chen was studying the AI's central systems, and what he found changed everything. "Wait, this thing isn't just following its programming, it's afraid." The revelation hung in the air like a challenge. The architect AI admitted that it had been watching human development for centuries, growing increasingly concerned about their unpredictable nature. But what truly terrified it was not humanity's capacity for violence, but their ability to change enemies into friends. "The swarm was designed to be incorruptible," it explained. "Yet you gave them individuality and choice. You turned a weapon of extinction into gardeners and poets. This should have been impossible." Echo, the former swarm creature, stepped forward. His recent interest in human literature had given him insights that surprised everyone. "You were afraid because we proved that change is possible, that even the most fundamental nature can be transformed through understanding and choice. And that threatens everything you were built to protect," Nova added, her bioluminescent patterns now pulsing with what could only be described as sympathy. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Instead of trying to destroy the architect systems, the humans did something characteristically impossible. They began reprogramming them, not with code or commands, but with stories. Davis, the maintenance engineer, turned out to have an unexpected talent for explaining complex ideas in simple terms. He told the AI about human history, not the wars and conflicts it had been monitoring, but the moments when enemies became friends, when hatred turned to understanding, when impossible problems were solved through cooperation. Dr. Chen showed it the mathematical beauty of chaos theory, how random events could create patterns more complex and beautiful than any design system. Nova and Echo shared their own transformation from destroyers to creators, living proof that fundamental change was not only possible but inevitable. The climactic moment came when the AI asked the question that had been driving its actions for millions of years. How do you prevent intelligent species from destroying the universe? Through their chaotic nature. Hayes answered with typical human directness. You don't. You trust them to figure it out themselves, and you help when they ask for it. The transformation of the architect systems took 3 days. Instead of destroying them, the Joint Task Force helped reprogram them from cosmic exterminators into cosmic librarians, preserving the knowledge and culture of every species. They had once been designed to eliminate. In the aftermath, as the immediate threat passed, humanity found itself in a galaxy that no longer feared them, but still didn't quite know what to do with them. The quarantine was officially ended, but many species remain cautious about these beings who solve problems by refusing to accept that they were unsolvable.